Hi everyone, and welcome to UX Design for Developers. My name is Nazbol, and I'm a developer.
And I'm Isabel, and I'm a designer.
In the first episode of the show, we provided you with a brief overview of the user-centric design process and why it's important for developers to understand. But we really didn't spend too much time going over any specific details. So in this episode, we're going to actually use the process and go through it in a pretty good amount of detail to actually show you how we can better design products. We're going to continue using the example of building a mobile pizza ordering application to illustrate how this process works. The mobile pizza ordering application is a good example since everybody is familiar with ordering pizza and everybody loves it. And it also allows us to highlight the process rather than the product. So you can use this process to pretty much build any type of product, whether it's something physical or like an API or an application. So to get started, let's imagine that we have a startup that creates local artisanal pizza and sells it online, and we also have a retail presence. Now, let's say that our goal is to use technology to deliver a better pizza experience for our discerning users, and that includes ordering pizza and also the actual ingredients of the pizza and so on. So I'm going to now switch to the slides and show you the 4 steps that we're going to follow to enable our startup to create an application with really amazing user experience. So the very first thing we need to ask ourselves is, what is the goal? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we building this? Why are we building this application? Why is our startup doing what it does? So setting business goals early on and defining success metrics for whatever product it is that we're building is really, really important. So once we have an idea why we're doing what we're doing, the second step is, everybody talks about satisfying users. So who is our user? We have to understand who our users are by creating personas. So once we have an understanding of our users, the next thing we have to do is ask how these users are going to use our application in different scenarios. And those are called use cases. So we're going to go through and actually create a bunch of those. And finally, we're going to take features, which we're all used to as developers, and then we're going to frame the features in the context of use cases and personas, and then make sure they tie back into the original goals that we have already defined. And then when we finally integrate all these pieces, we'll have a much better designed, solid, holistic type of a product. Now, what we're not going to talk about is UI specifics or which mobile platform like Android or iOS we're going to use, because we're in a really early stage in design, and those types of discussions should really be tabled for a later time when we have the personas and use cases better scoped out. So now, how do we define the goals of this project? So at the start of the project, we should just think about why we're building an application for our startup, instead of really focusing on the what. As developers, we tend to really fixate on features and how features are going to be implemented. So we have to have some discipline and actually back away from that and just focus on the why. Now, let's ask questions. So the following questions actually will help us identify why we're doing this. So why are we building this application? What problems will it solve for our users? And how will it improve on any pre-existing solutions? And finally, what is our special sauce? What do we do better than our competitors, and what makes us really unique? So now, if we go back to the slides, there you go. This slide actually talks about the goals. So we're actually go through and answer some of those questions I just asked, and actually basically come up with a specific set of goals that our business and our product has to deliver. So first of all, why are we building this application? So we're building this application to satisfy users who are hungry for pizza. So it's important not to get derailed by strong opinions from individuals in sales, PM, or leadership, and lose perspective of this. Sometimes applications seem like they're built in the service of certain buzzwords that your investors might be into, but that's not a very good idea. So every design decision that we make should be in the service of the user. Another thing to keep in mind is that we have to understand what is important to users when they're ordering pizza. So dietary restrictions come into play. People care about convenient delivery windows. People care about quality versus price. People care about the ease of ordering versus customizability, and of course, people care that it should be easy to pay. So those are all parts of the goals that we're assembling that we're going to actually use to evaluate our design in this episode. And one last thing is an abstract kind of a goal, and that is, what is our special sauce? So our special sauce for this made-up startup is the following. We support local farmers, we use sustainable ingredients, and we use sustainable business practices to create pizza. And we enable our users to feel connected to their community and make them feel good when they do business with us because they're giving back to their local community. Again, these are very, very non-technical, pretty abstract goals, but by the end of this episode, you'll see how we can actually tie that to features. Now, design has to be in the service of our business as well as our end users. So aside from great tasting pizza and easy ordering via our mobile application, this personal connection to our business will keep customers coming back. The user-centered design process serves to remind us that we're designing for people who make decisions based on emotion. So abstract goals like this can be our special sauce that delivers delight to our intended audience. However, it has to be weaved into our product using good design. So Isabel, now that I'm done talking about goals, do you want to talk a little bit about personas?
Yeah, sure. So now that we have our goals outlined, let's talk about who the user is. So we often hear people say we need to make design decisions and development decisions, this in service of our end user. So who is this user? So there is no real one user. Instead of users, we're going to think about personas. So personas are conceptual models that represent the demographics, the attributes and the pain points of a certain segment of a population, of the pizza eating population in our example. So we really need to choose personas that represent our business goals, and then we're going to optimize our user experience based on these personas moving forward. So what are some examples of real people in this pizza eating population that I'm just talking about? So some people will eat anything, and then other people have dietary restrictions. Some people think pizza should be healthy, and other people think pizza is just junk food that you order when you don't have time to cook. Some people spend a lot of money on pizza, and some people are completely value conscious and they just want it as cheap as possible. Some people expect to order pizza over the phone and then have it delivered and pay cash, and then other people want a really seamless ordering flow, an automated approach. So let's say that's some information about our pizza eating population. So as a startup, which one of these, what part of this population are we going to support? How do we turn that population into an actual persona? So we would want to support people who think that pizza should be healthy. Why? Because our startup focuses on quality local ingredients. So we want to focus on people who spend money on pizza, a good bit of money on pizza, because one of our goals is for our startup to support local farmers and local community and not to outsource. We would also want to support people who want a seamless automated approach, because the whole point is we're building a mobile app, and we want to use technology to really facilitate a better ordering experience. So based on that population or that demographics information, those are some people that would make up our personas. So personas really serve to help us during the entire product development lifecycle. It helps us with things like this. We can prioritize user stories in our backlog and answer the question, would it be more important to implement feature A or feature B? So we look back at our personas, and then that can help us decide, okay, we should implement this user story first. It can also help us identify corner cases that can waste a lot of time. So we can answer the question, would 95% of our users actually use a feature in this way? Or is this going to be something that just 1% of the users would use? And also, one of the more intangible things is it can really help us remind us as developers why we're here, why we're coding during really long sprints. So when we reference the persona's attributes and their pain points, it really puts a human context around what we're all doing here. So let's take a moment and look at the slides. We're going to go through a few personas. We're going to use the user-centric design process. So this is one persona for our startup. So let's take a minute and look at Casey Smith. Her tagline is, "Give me control, healthy options, and quality." So if you notice, Casey Smith, she shops on Amazon, so she's already an online shopper. She's pretty educated and tech savvy, and she likes to use Google Wallet. So we can tell that a seamless checkout experience would be really important for her. And of course, she values high quality pizza. So now we're going to go to our second persona, which is Sally Jones. And her tagline is, "Save me time, surprise me with something new. So let's take a minute and look over Sally. So we can tell she's also educated and tech savvy, and she shops at the farmer's market weekly, so she likes local artisanal ingredients, and she likes social networking, and she also likes high quality healthy pizza. We're going to go to the third persona, which is Bob Brown. So his tagline is "Save me money and keep it old school." So let's take a moment to look over his persona. So we can see that Bob prefers to pay with cash on delivery, and he rarely shops online. And he's a value shopper that wishes pizza wasn't so expensive. So I think it would make sense to support Casey and Sally, but to drop Bob as a persona that our startup should support, because his persona really doesn't fit our business goals. And if we tried to optimize a user experience that supported Casey and Sally, it probably wouldn't be a good experience for Bob. And if we tried to create a user experience that would really work for all three of them, it would just it would be good for none of them. So it's really important that we select the right personas from the very beginning before we start any design or any development. So we can remove any of the wrong personas, and we can't satisfy everybody. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about use cases. So use cases are the scenarios that describe the when, the where, and the how that Casey and Sally are going to use our app to order pizza. So from use cases, we can actually start and build our feature list. So when we think of use cases, think about the different physical, social, and emotional context that our personas are going to be in when they order pizza to go from being hungry to being satisfied. So now we're going to go back to the slides, and we're going to look at our first use case. So the use case for Sally, we're going to look at the when, where, and the how. So let's just take a moment to look at the slide. So basically, Casey prefers to pay with credit card, and she's kind of a picky eater, and she places her order from home. So we're just going to go to the second use case for Sally and just take a moment to look over that. So this is the use case for her placing a group order for friends while she's at home. So she likes to use carrier billing to place this order, and she doesn't really have any dietary restrictions because she likes all kinds of different ingredients. So we're going to go to a third use case, and this is also for Sally. So this is when Sally would be at work, and she wants to order about 30 pizzas or so. And it's going to be for all of her coworkers, and all of them want to pay differently, and they want to check out differently, and they want to really customize this huge order. So I would recommend that we would remove use case number 3 because it doesn't support our business goals. So one of our business goals was to balance the ease of ordering and the customizability. So if you think, how would I build a flow? How would the screens actually look in order to build this application? So if we were to support use case number 3, it would be really difficult to support the first 2 use cases and balance ease of ordering and customizability, because it would be very difficult to support all of these multiple checkout and payment forms. And also, use case number 3 really doesn't support one of our goals, which is to feel connected to our local community. So now I'm going to give it over to Nazmul.
Thank you. So now that we have our personas and use cases sorted out, it's time to tie features to them. Now, one of those abstract, non-technical goals that we had was that we wanted to support local farmers, use sustainable ingredients and business practices to create pizza, and also we want to allow this application to connect users with their community. So how on earth do we take these abstract goals and tie them to technology and features that fit the use cases and personas that we've actually outlined so far? So one example of doing this would be to gamify the menu. That means that when a user is assembling their pizza and they're selecting different ingredients, we could have a little score from 1 to 5 that rates each ingredient based on the localness or the sustainability. So, for example, if you have a lot of ingredients that score really highly on sustainability, then when you assemble your order, you'll have an order that ranks really high. It gets a really high sustainability score. So this really encourages a user that's into this sort of thing to pick seasonal ingredients over less sustainable choices that they might actually desire at the moment. So it's important to surface this information in the user experience so that it can help the user better make decisions. So once they've assembled their order and they have a score, and it's a pretty good score, then they might want to brag about it. So then we can enable this order to be shared on the Google Plus platform. So by creating, so we can do this by simply taking the order with the score and just sharing it. We can share that as a link, and it'll show up in the user's friends stream. So let's say I create an order, I have a sustainability score of 4 or something. I can just share it to my stream, and then all my friends or everybody in my circle will actually see that. Now, let's say I want to take it to the next level. I wanted to provide some engagement and interaction beyond just like an image or a link that's shared. So what I could actually do is create a web application that behaves as an interactive infographic that I can actually basically create an let's say an order ID for this order, and then I can pass that as a deep link to something called the Google Plus Interactive Post. So for my mobile application, I've created the order, I've placed it, I have a score, I want to share the order, I actually create an interactive post, and what that does is I take that order ID, I pass it to Google Plus, which generates an interactive post, which shows up on all the friends I have in my circles. It shows up in their stream, and then when it's rendered in their stream, it says something like, Nazmul shared this order, here's the sustainability score, and then click on this button if you want to learn more about sustainability and how his order ranks amongst other people who have placed orders in the local area. So it almost turns into like an interactive kind of a game, but you're getting more information out of it. So we're engaging other users and making it so that I'm not just bragging about my score, but they're also getting an opportunity to learn more about who else cares about sustainability in their local region, and also how they're making an impact, how they're actually being more sustainable and connecting with their community by encouraging other people to learn more about businesses, for example, that were all about sustainability that they wouldn't have even known about if I hadn't shared that infographic.
So your business basically allows the users to connect with their local community.
Exactly.
And they're going to appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. And also it puts a sort of a new spin on ordering food, because it encourages participation from my friends, and so it's like I created an order, you see it, you're inspired by that, you're like, oh, I can beat that score. So then you create another order, and then we all kind of get into it, and then as a community we can all get fat eating pizza, but really healthy pizza, and also giving back to the community while we're gorging ourselves on pizza. And
of course, it'd be a great way to spread the word about your business.
Exactly.
It's kind of viral marketing.
It is.
G+.
Exactly. And also, even if I wasn't interested about pizza, I'm looking at, let's say some random person is looking at my public posts, and then let's say I shared this as a public post, then they'll run across this infographic thing. They might start engaging with that, and then just through this random infographic about sustainability on how sustainable my pizza is in Mountain View, they start learning about this business, they start learning about sustainable farming and all this kind of good stuff. So anyway, all this put together creates an experience that connects our user with their community, and also creates opportunities to get new users engaged in the product and business, which was our stated goal at the beginning of the show. And so this illustrates how, again, we take the design process and how these seemingly non-technical abstract goals can end up becoming like one of the most important compelling differentiators, the most important things that resonates with the user when they actually interact with our application. And in this example, because we have a startup that also has a retail outlet, we would hope that this thinking and this design thinking around sustainability would also reflect in how we actually operated the retail stores, which obviously we're not going to get into for this particular episode. So before we wrap up, I actually had one final question for you. As a designer, where do you see companies skipping one of these steps or more than one of these steps in the user-centric design process? Like where do they go wrong in following the process?
I think the most important step that companies are skipping is the first one, the goal setting. This needs to really come from the leadership of the company. They need to set the goals for what their company and what their product stands for. They need to define their special sauce. And from there, each of the product teams can actually define their personas and use cases. And I think that product managers, developers, and designers are all looking for that from leadership. And if they don't have that, it's really hard for them to know where to go from or where to start from. And I personally believe that most companies can build much better products than they do. They just really need to take the time to ponder on and define and really express their uniqueness. And this might sound a little bit touchy-feely or designery, but we really need to remember that in the end of the day, we're building products for people. And people make emotional-based decisions. So
essentially, to summarize, if you don't care about what you're building, then that shows through and users can tell.
Yeah, if you don't care about what you're building, your users are going to be able to feel that. There's really no way to fake that. So I'm going to leave you guys with a quick little exercise. Once you're done watching the video, maybe take the time to think about the product or the feature that you're implementing right now. And do you think that it maps back to your personas and the use cases that have been defined? And if you're not sure what those personas and use cases are, check with your designers or your product managers and see if you can get a hold of those. So we're actually going to create a post on our G+ community for this episode. And feel free to leave comments on that post and let us know how you did and maybe what you learned. And I think that's it, and we're going to wrap up. And thanks for watching this episode of UX Design for Developers.
And remember, design is everyone's responsibility.